it, without having an internet connection. But once a month, we suggest you go on. Not only do you get your update to the software, but you can also download your 5 free designs for each module. And these are specific to the module. So if you have all 3 of our primary modules, then such as Block Piecer, Quilt Embellisher, and Perfect Embroidery Pro, then you get 5 different designs for each one for a total of 15. The other things that you can look at if you're online are your daily inspiration, the webinars. Once a month you can click here to go and sign up for webinars like this. Our next one will actually be next week on Perfect Embroidery Pro because we had to reschedule it from the previous date. So the next 3 weeks we are having webinars. On this week it's on My Block Piecer, next week it's on Perfect Embroidery Pro, and the following week I think we have a combination of My Block Piecer and Quilt Embellisher. Here is where you get your free monthly projects as a user. Or a consumer of the software, you get free projects. And here's where you can connect to Eileen's weekly software inspiration blog. Her software blog comes out every Saturday. She also has other blogs you can subscribe to. We have Multi-Needle Monday, there's a monogram blog, lots and lots of information that we can get from Eileen. And here are other inspiration resources. So without further ado, on the My Inspiration page, we're just going to close this down and go to our design page. Now, My Block Piecer is a standalone program. You don't have to have any of our other software programs to be able to run it. And it's very simple what it does, but it's very elegant in the way that it does it. My Block Piecer will allow you to take designs of quilt blocks, borders, what have you, and create an in-the-hoop project from them. Not only will it create the design to stitch in the hoop for you, it will also give you the resources you need to cut the pieces to make that block. Let's start off with a simple block. First of all, for those of you who aren't familiar with the software, here's our design page right here in the center. I have mine set up in inches because that's the way I think in inches. I don't think in millimeters or metric. But if I had to compare something to metric, all I need to do is right-click, and I could switch this to metric, and then I will right-click and switch it right back to inches when I'm done. I was told in 3rd grade that we would be on the metric system by the time I graduated from high school, and that is actually passed many years ago. So I still think in inches, and that's the way I want to keep my screen because I know what size that is. I have my grid set up in 1/2-inch increments, and all of this is customizable to the user, so you can set it up however you like. Let's go and look at some of the icons. If I hover over an icon, the first thing I see is that it tells me what that icon is for. This is my cutter. Here is my text tool. Here is my top align, shift up. So I don't have to remember what the pictures mean. I can just hover over it and find what I need to do. These 4 icons right here are really the most important for what we're doing with My Block Piecer. We have built into the software a catalog of quilt blocks. There are over 1,200 different blocks. Actually, I think the count is 1,263. And there are assortment. Here are album blocks, here are basic blocks, classic stars, 8-point stars. If there's a plus next to, like in this case, 5-patch, if I click that, 5-patch is divided into 3 different blocks. Okay, one of your enhancements that came out on Monday is the ability to find a block. If you see down here at the bottom of the screen, If I click and find and say, let's do maple, I can click maple and go down, do the up or down arrow. I'm kind of at the top, so I'll just click down, and it's going to highlight everything with maple in the name, and keep looking until I find it, because when you've got 1,263 different blocks, sometimes it's difficult to find the block you're looking for. So that is one way that we can do it, and it will highlight those blocks for us. But let's go back to our basic blocks and select a block that we want to build. I'm going to take this Peony 2 and click OK. Now, before I do that, I could come over here and give it the exact size. But one of the great things about the software is it's very forgiving. And I don't have to do things in a certain order. I can go back and change things later on. So I can set it a size for it right here, like if I want a 6x6 block or a custom block, and click OK. Or I could have come over here in my properties box when I bring up my block and change it here. So if I want it to be 6.25, I could change it there. Either way, and it doesn't matter. Now, when the block appears on my desktop in my design screen, when it's got the stripes through it like this, that means that that artwork is selected. These are artwork patches. If you're familiar with quilting, this is your patches. And the size of your block is your finished size. You don't have to worry about seam allowances or anything else. So if you see here, it's just pieces of fabric that, or pieces of artwork that are built to make a block. Now, I can select the entire block, and I'm going to show you the process very simply at first, and then we'll go back through with some details. The first thing I want to do is create my workflow. I want to build the design for this block. When I come into my workflow dialog box, I can select a hoop size from any one of the many, many hoops that we have available. And I'll do Baby Lock Brother 200 by 200. And you see how that changed the white space behind the block? That white space represents the size of my hoop. So I know just by looking here that that block is probably going to fit in that hoop. Then all I have to do to build my in the hoop design, customized to the size I want it, is click Auto Build. And I'm done. Now, if we preview that block or the pattern, I see here's my stitching outline. But having been a foundation piecer, I would like my block or my patches to sew in order. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say sort my numbers. The reason I do this after I create my design is because until I create the design, I don't know what sequence I'm going to stitch these in. So let's watch. I click sort number, and it says if you've already cut your patches, you may want to reconsider. But I do want to continue, and now you can see by the numbers here. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's very logically organized, and I am a happy quilter. Now let's preview this block, and it shows me with 3 or 4 different colors here how that's going to be stitched out. This is actually a picture of my design in the hoop. When I go to save it, it does a couple of things for me. I'm going to say that this one, this design, I'll put it in designs, and I'm going to call it Peony, Peony. And I'm going to save it since I'm stitching it in my Baby Lock Brother 8x8 hoop. I'm going to save it as a Pez design for that machine. and click Save. Now, what happens at this point, let me pull this over, is that it creates a folder for me called Peony, where I told it to put it. And in that folder, I have a design, the Peony design, like we just saw. I have the original artwork design in the original size that I did it. And then I have a printable instructions customized to the block that I just, and design I just created. So let's click on that and take a look. And when it comes up, sorry, I've got two screens going here, so I've got to pull it back over so you can see it. Here is my PDF, and let's make it a little smaller so we can see the pages. This is printable. It shows me my artwork block. There's piece 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. My design name is Peony, and the hoop I selected was the Baby Lock Brother 200 by 200. Now I'm going to scroll down. The next thing it shows me is my design, which is named Peony_001, and there is 1 unit. Sometimes in designs, we're going to stitch 2 different sections of that design in the same hooping, so there might be 2 units, but I'll show you that in a minute. This one all gets done in 1 hooping, so it's very simple. Then my third page, and let's zoom in a little bit on this so you can see, is my third page contains my custom printed instructions for how to stitch this block out. The first color, which is in blue, not that you have to change colors, but the color designation tells you that there's going to be a stop when it finishes that color. So my first color is blue. The blue is the placement stitch to place all of the units or patches for my block. The second step is in green, and this is, it says right side up, so I'm going to put that patch right side up, and is the tacking stitch for fabric 1, which, if I go back up here, is piece 1 right here. So I'm going to lay that down. It's got the seam allowances already stitched out, so I've got a perfect outline of patch 1, and I'm going to stitch that, and it will tack it down. The stitching will be in the seam allowance, but it will tack it down so that when the foot moves around the block, it's not going to pick that patch up and move it somewhere else. Then the next thing is step 3, which is a different color of thread. This is in red, and this is my folding stitch for fabric 2. So I'm going to put fabric 2 right sides together and stitch this stitch right here, which is the seam line between those 2 pieces. Then I flip that open and do my tack down for that patch. After every patch, so it's stitch and flip, and after every patch we're going to stitch it down in the seam allowance somewhere so that patch can't come flying up. And by the time we finish step number 12 here, we've completed the entire block. Very simple, very straightforward. And you can print that out. It's customizable for every block that you do. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at, we're going to close that, is printing or printing templates or cutting the patches to go into this block. So with it the same size as it is, I don't want to change the size or it's not going to fit. I'm going to click on my cutter tool up here in the top left-hand corner. When I do that, I have a different dialog box that comes up, and this is for my cutting function. I have frame 1 and frame 2. It defaults to the same hoop. So if I was going to use cutting needles or something like that, I could do it in a hoop. If I want to just print out these templates, and you see it comes complete with the seam allowance that we're going to use, which in this case down here at the bottom It defaults to 0.25 inches, a quarter of an inch. Those of you who are used to quilting are very comfortable with a quarter of an inch seam allowance. I can change it from doing this in a hoop to printing it on paper. If I want to do paper, let's do letter size, and this is built into the software, then I can look at, I couldn't fit all of this because that's a large triangle on the same page of paper, but it will print out these templates and it will save this as a PDF so I can just send it directly to my printer, and I have paper templates, which are my guide. I could measure these, use my rotary cutter. I could stitch them on a sticky template paper and cut them out, stick them to my fabric, use my rotary cutter that way, or hand cut them. It doesn't matter. It also tells me, here's my fabric width, 45 inches, and with the pale yellow, I need to do 2 frames of it, so it's 9 inches, 2 frames 9 inches long. In the pink, I also need 1 frame 9 inches long to fit, so I can determine my fabric usage. My other option, instead of printing it on paper or stitching it in a hoop, I could go to my, let's see, my Brother Scan and Cut or my Silhouette Cameo or whatever, if I have a cutting tool, and select that tool. And now here's my 12 by 12 mat for my Brother Scan and Cut. So I only have to load the yellow color once. And here's my coral pink that's going to cut these 2 patches, and it cuts it with the seam allowance and everything else. If I have something that's kind of tricky angles, because measuring 7/8 of an inch is not fun for me. I don't like to do the math with quilting. I just like to cut things up and put it back together. So with this, I can have it cut the patches for me. I could print them out. I could measure them. I could cut it with my rotary cutter. I could print out templates and stick them to my fabric and manually cut them. I can use the tools I have for the job at hand. Now, I can also, when I'm cutting out my blocks, I can come down here and say, well, I'm going to make 4 of these blocks, and change my repeats down here at the bottom to 4, and to click Apply. Well, now I have 2 yellow frames, so maybe I'm going to change from the Brother Scan and Cut 12 by 12 to the 12 by 24 inch mat. So I can fit them all on one mat. I just put 1 piece of fabric on there, it goes through and it cuts all of my squares and triangles for me. And then with the pink, it's going to cut all those for me as well. So I can use the tools I have to create the block I want. I can even adjust my margin down here, how far away from the edge I need to be, the spacing between. If I'm going to print these out on paper, I don't need any spacing between because I can use my scissors and cut a straight line. I also have the option to optimize orientation. When I do that, now what happens is it puts them going the same direction as in the finished block. So if I'm using a striped fabric or something directional, it's going to help me with that. If I want to use less fabric, then I say optimize the orientation, and now you see the yellow fits on a single mat. So I say fabric. And here's where you would select the option to use. If you had cutting needles and you want to cut them in the hoop, you can select using borer needles, and the needle length, which is given to you on the needles, 0.2 millimeters is our default, and it works very well. So I would save that to, if I save it as borer needles, it will stitch it at as a design using the cutting needles. If I have it on the scan and cut, I can save, let's take it off the borer needles, and I can save this directly. I pick the name of it and can save it as the format I need for my cutter. So here we are with SVG for the Cameo Silhouette and FCM for my brother Scan and Cut. Then I don't have to adjust anything. I can save it on a stick, put it in my Scan and Cut, and I'm good to go. Very simple, very easy, very straightforward. Okay, now let's take this a step further. Hey, Nancy, do we have any questions yet? Okay, well, I'm not hearing Nancy. Oh, that's okay.
All right, so Miss Virginia of St. Louis says, am I limited to the number of blocks in the program?
Well, actually, no, you're not. You are not deleted or limited to the 1,263 blocks that are in the program. If I want to create my own, and let me just get rid of this, I was playing earlier, I can bring one up as a backdrop. Here, let me get rid of this. Okay, I'll delete, perhaps. Need to be in select. There we go. I can bring a design up as a backdrop, and in this case, let me get rid of the lines. It's kind of in my way. Okay, so here I have a picture of it's courthouse steps, and this is just a JPEG. I would bring this in and measure it. It tells me it's 8 inches wide by 10.64 high. Well, if we look at it, we know it's a square. So let me just select define the scale. And I want that to be, here, we'll just come down here and make sure that we are square. And we want it to be 8 inches. And, or we could have it say, let's be 7.5 inches. And click OK. Then it will resize it for me. We always want to have the right size because we need to have that done before we before we create our design or cut any pieces for it. We want to know what size the finished thing is going to be. Now, it's a very simple process. I can, with this as a backdrop, this was just a simple JPEG file. I can come up here and select artwork and select my magic wand, because if you have a magic wand, you ought to use it. I don't have to select my magic wand. I could just come down here and create a square where this yellow is and stuff. But you know what? If I have a good block, excuse me, I just as soon use my magic wand. It's a lot quicker and easier and fun. So I've got the yellow color already picked. I'm going to right-click to select that color and click in the center here. I have my artwork set to be filled. So what I'm doing in this process is creating an artwork block just like I had in my block catalog. And we'll just go through it. I'll select now color number 2 and click on these 2 patches. Then I'll select color 3 and click on these 2. And right-click on color 4 and click on these. Then 5 and click here, and 6 and click on these 2. And let's see, if I dismiss my backdrop, I can see what I've done. Okay, so I'm just missing these 2 outer ones. I want it darker, so we'll click on color 8 and click, click. Now, I have all of those colors set up as artwork. Here is my block. If I dismiss my backdrop completely, then you can see This is just like the other block where it's artwork built on top of the screen using our backdrop as kind of like a light box or a guide to trace that. Now let's put that back over where it was. Now, very simply, I could do a couple of things at this point. I could select the whole design and click on my workflow just like I did before. And let's do reset. Okay. Click Auto Build. I should select my hoop first. We'll do the Brother 200 by 300. We've auto built it. And now we'll preview. Whoops, it doesn't like that hoop. So we'll select a larger hoop. And because I made it a larger block, we'll do the singer. And click Auto Build, Preview. And it likes that one better. So here's my entire block that is done in this hoop, and I just stitch and flip and stitch and flip. But one thing we could do, let's close this, while we're still in this mode, is we can Audition Fabric. We have built into the software thousands of fabrics. And when you download My Block Piecer and your update to it, you will get those fabrics. You can also add your own fabrics to the fabric library. The first time you bring it up, it takes it a minute to load all of the unique fabrics that we have in there. I've got batik textiles. There's so many different options here. And I have lots of moda. It's very simple to go out, and even if you have fabric, if you just have the selvage edge on a piece of fabric, you can go Google that. Chances are it's out there on the internet somewhere with an image. If you don't have an image of it, you can certainly take a picture or scan it. Anything that's shiny doesn't scan as well as a more matte color fabric, but experiment and add them to your fabric library.
So your options are truly just unlimited.
Oh, they are. They are absolutely unlimited, and it's so simple because you can right-click and add or delete. So I can right-click to copy, right-click to paste. I could select a whole bunch. It's very, very simple to do. This is one of my favorite palettes. So let's use this one to audition fabrics for this block. I'll start out with the light-colored fabric in the center. Then we'll select color number 2, which is a little bit darker. We'll go back to the same palette because then, you know, I get to buy fabric from the whole collection and not just part of it. And then we'll go back again and, let's throw a little green in there. It doesn't by any means have to match the colors of your artwork. In fact, I would challenge you to not do that. And this is a great way, before you ever cut your fabric or stitch it, you can get a good idea what your fabric is going to look like in the finished design. There's a lighter one. Which one am I? Let's do, just did that one. Let's do color 5. And let's do the opposite of that. And 6. Go back and do, ooh, I like that green. And the last one, what do I want to do? Ooh, we'll give it, make it really dark. Well, that's kind of fun, but you know, I don't think I like the pinky tones in this up here. So I can go back and select those and change them so I can get a block that looks the way I want it to look from the very beginning. And I don't have to worry, you know what, I think I want this. You could spend a lot of time doing this. It's very fun, and let's do that. Do a little bit darker in the middle there. Okay, So just play around with it, with what you want to do. Then when you go to cut this, let's go to our cutter, and you can select whatever format you want to cut it in. If you want to do it on a scan and cut, and you want to default to the largest. You can always put a smaller hoop or a piece of paper, well, not a smaller piece of paper, a smaller hoop or a smaller mat to cut those out with. But if you've got a lot of pieces, not with 1 or 2 or 3, these are all just 2 pieces, so we could do something, you know, fairly simple with that and straightforward. And I may just want to print those out on paper because they would be very easy to cut. But you see, it gives me my seam allowance around each one of those, and it shows me the fabric I'm going to cut it out in. So I don't have to come up with a way to, what do you call it, a key, where I go, okay, orange is the black with the green polka dots, and figure that out, because that's where I will run into mistakes. So very easy to do, very straightforward. You get to audition everything, and if you want to, you don't have to.
Well, you know, Miss Hannah, that is quite beautiful, and my birthday's coming up. So if you would actually like to keep that, you know, I have one quick question for you.
Okay, thank you. What?
It refers to the cutting process from Miss Beth. She says, when using a cutting machine, can you move the pieces to be cut to, say, the upper left-hand corner to conserve fabric?
Absolutely, because with your cutting machines and the software that you have with those, you can reorganize any of that. And when you save it as, say, an SVG file or an FCM file, there's software out there that you can go in and manipulate that. Absolutely, you can conserve fabric. That's one of the reasons that, you know, as a somewhat experienced piecer, I like to save fabric, and I save scraps. So I don't want to use any more fabric than I have to make the block. Did that answer your question?
I hope it did.
I hope so. Okay, well, you know, here's another thing that I found with the software. It lets me do what I want to do in the size I want to do it and use the tools that I have. That's one of the things that just amazed me about it. I can come in here again and select a backdrop, or I can import artwork. If I pull in artwork from another program, or I take a picture of something, like here's a star. Now when this came in at 6 by 6, but I want to make this star a 12-inch block. So I'm going to resize it. Now let's scroll back out so we can see it. Now with this block, I don't have a hoop that I can stitch in one hooping, you know, all together a 12-inch block. But I can come in here and do a quarter of it. And if I can do 1/4, because if I look at this and select my segments, here's one. Oh, I'm in backdrop, so I need to build it real quick. Let's fill it. You know what, actually, I think I have this. Let's just, I've already done that. Excuse me. Let's create a new file, and in my design library, I've already created the artwork for that block. I'm going to come in here, and there it is, my woven star. Okay, now that one's 10 by 10, but this time I want to make it 12 by 12, or 12 and a half. And this is always your finished size. Okay, so here's my 12 and a half inch block. So I've resized it so that my artwork pieces, well, when I brought them in, they come in combined. I could ungroup them. So you can see it's artwork just sitting on top of my design screen. And then maybe I just want to do this quarter of it. Watch with me if you will. Once you start playing with the different blocks, you can see how they're done. And I won't be able to fit a whole one into my hoop. So I'm just going to select by holding down the control key and clicking on the patches that I want, a quarter of this block. I could select this quarter of this block. To do it in a longer hoop, then click on my workflow tool, select the hoop that I want to put it in, and let's see, in this case, let's do, that one's not big enough, so I can tell. So let's do I need that to be rotated the other way. So we'll do 200 by 300. That's still not big enough. Maybe I will rotate that when I get it into my machine, and in the meantime I'll select a hoop that I made called extra large hoop so that I can just create a big enough hoop to figure out my design, and then once I have my design I can put it into a hoop. Now I just click auto build and I'm done. Here's my preview, and I stitch the whole quarter in one hooping. So if I do that 4 times with those fabrics, then all I have to do is put those together with my sewing machine and I'm done. And I can show you how that works. Let's skip over right here to the contents of the online manual, which I need to come up on this screen.
While you're pulling that out, one of the questions was, what if my hoop isn't big enough for a block? And I think you just answered it.
Well, yes, that's what I'm, right, that's what I'm doing right now. In the manual, it will show you pictures of block assembly. Now, let's go down to a combination. So here I am with that same star, and I was able to fit 2 of these sections in one hoop, my extra large hoop, for whatever size I made it for these pictures. And then once I was through building that in the hoop, because I've got all these bias edges and stuff, that doing it in the hoop, my points come out perfect. I'm very happy. And you see how it stitches the tack down around them. Then here's my piece, and I just trim off the excess stabilizer with my rotary cutter and ruler. Now I've got 4 sections to that star. I stitch them together with the sewing machine. It's so easy, and I can make a large block with the assistance of my embroidery machine, and do the simple parts with my sewing machine. So I don't have to mess with all those tedious angles and points, and it's great fun. While I'm over here, let me show you just a in the hoop embroidery and how this works. You have hoop stabilizer, and I like a wash away tear away stabilizer, because then I just leave it in until I'm finished quilting the whole quilt, because once you wash it, then the stabilizer, the water soluble portion goes away. You have a bit of fiber left next to your batting under your fabric, and I'm okay with that. Nobody knows it's even there. So here's the first color that we stitched, like the blue color, and it numbers every place where you're going to put that fabric. And then on the first patch, and you'll notice here, if I was doing this with my sewing machine, I might have taken a little better care when I cut out my pieces, but with this one it doesn't matter. As long as it's in the seam allowance, I'm good to go. Then that tacks down the first piece. Then we place the next piece face down, or right sides together, and it stitches the line between them, okay, to attach. That's my 1/4 inch seam allowance, which I did not even have to fret over. For any of you who have tried to ever master the scant 1/4 inch, it's very easy to do with an embroidery machine. Then I flip it back and stitch the tack down. Now we do this tack down because we don't want the foot to catch that piece of fabric, but the tack down's done out in the seam allowance, so it's never even going to show. Then we go to our next piece, right sides together, stitch the seam that connects this piece to that piece, and then flip it back. And here's, you know, most of our block built. We still have 4 corners to go, but it works very simply. And then we just keep building the block in the hoop. It's really fun, it's easy, and it is absolutely precise. You can be less precise and you will have perfect blocks come out of that. So that's what we did with this. What other questions do we have, Nancy? Oh, I see a question here. Can I quilt? Are you there? Can I quilt my block while it's still in the hoop? You know, you absolutely could. This software is just for piecing, and it pieces very well. But once you have your block in the hoop, and remember when we started on the program, we saved the C2S, the native version of the artwork. I can bring that up in my decorative quilter or any other program and put my quilting designs on it and never even take that block out of the hoop until it's totally quilted. Float your batting and backing underneath and you are good to go.
Tamara, we were
Yes.
also asked if you can import fabrics from Electric Quilt, EQ7, and EQ Stash.
Oh, I have some friends out there. Yeah, she could import those fabrics, and even better than that, I can import artwork. I could create a block over there because it's great for creating blocks, and they have a huge block library like we do. But I can create those and save those as artwork. I've already showed you, you could save it as a JPEG and create your own artwork, but I can also import artwork. So here's a block right here that I had in EQ7. I can open this because I'm importing it, and it comes in as artwork. Now, here's the trick with this. I wanted it to be really high quality and not pixelated, which makes this block extremely large. If I go over to my transform, the width of this block is almost 72 inches. So it could be a twin bed quilt. All we have to do is resize that and make it, oh, I don't know, if I want to do a 7.25, 7¼ inch block. I don't have to figure out the size of these pieces. I just say, this is what I want my finished block to be, and it is. Now I can take this block, and select it all. I could Audition Fabrics and take it straight to my cutter and auto build it. And there you go. I just digitized this design.
I want you to know Sharon Schroeder is really excited because she couldn't get her other software program to create these blocks, and she says thank you.
Oh, tell Sharon she is very welcome.
It was your personal pleasure, wasn't it?
It was. Absolutely. So now it tells you how you're going to do this, and this one is in more than one piece. Let me show you how this works. Because we couldn't do it all in one hooping, I can come in, and here it's doing it in 4 units. Let me show you by saving this. It's a little bit easier if you look at it. We'll do this as my block because I don't remember what the name of it was. Okay. And now it comes up, and in my first design, well, let's go to the preview with the PDF. Okay, here's my whole block. Then it tells me in here I have 4 units. Remember we talked about units earlier and that it could be more than one section? The units are a section of the block. So here is unit 1. Each one of them builds a quarter of this block. So in the first unit, here's the first quarter that's built, then the second quarter, then the third, then the fourth. Okay? Then in the next section, let's zoom out a little bit on this so you can see it better. It's going to put these two sides together and these two sides together. If you don't want to do that in your embroidery hoop, you can just stitch those together. And but it gives you instructions if you want to do it in your embroidery machine. And then lastly, it stitches those two triangles together to make your finished block. Very simple, very straightforward. Do as much of it in the hoop as you want. Do, you know, the rest of it manually if you want to. Or I don't say manually because I don't want to use that four-letter word, H-A-N-D, because I don't sew that way. I'll use my sewing machine or my embroidery machine. If you want to do it by hand, that's all entirely up to you.
So, Ms. Tamara,
Anyway.
If what you're telling us, so that this is a standalone program. It's you know, all by itself as one block pieces. It doesn't require another platform, right?
Right. Oh, it is standalone. And, you know, I was with a bunch of very smart women the last week, and I had a question that I hadn't thought of before, which was, well, if I really like piecing with my sewing machine, but I hate cutting things out, could I just cut out my patches with this and then piece them? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you like running your sewing machine, or if you don't have an embroidery machine but you got a cutter, you can do that as well. Or if you just want the templates, you know, it's using the tools you have to the best of their ability. You know, so you can, if you like using your cutter, and I like using my cutter for certain things. If it's very simple, then I don't, but let me show you an example. I'm going to open up a new file here, and this is what I love because no math involved. I'm going to bring up a block, and I want to make this block, and I'm going to get kind of crazy here because I probably would never actually piece this before. But here I have an 8 by 8 inch block, and I'm going to change this to, I want it to be 9 inches wide by 3 inches high, and apply. I'm going to make a really cool, funky border for a quilt. And you know what? I don't have to measure any of these angles. I can do an in the hoop piecing on this, and my points will be perfect. My angles will be precise. I don't have to measure anything. I don't have to deal with 7/8 of an inch or anything like that. So it doesn't have to be a square like a block. You can make it whatever you want it to be. So, other questions?
I do have another one
Okay.
from Margaret. It says, can you do curved blocks such as drunkard's path?
Drunkard's path. No, you can't. But let me show you what you can do. If because when you're piecing in the hoop and you're doing like stitch and flip and stitch and flip, it does need to be a straight line. However, let me open up a new page here, bring up a backdrop. Let's say we have a block like this, New York Beauty. Those are very popular. They're beautiful, and they're very they can be difficult to piece. But what I could do on this block is I could take and just do whatever is a straight line. Now I can't piece this orange path to the purple and gold here. I can't put this orange section here. But what I could do is just piece the purple and gold, which is the tedious part of it, and the blue and gold on this one because they're all straight lines. Then with my sewing machine, I could add the curved lines and do it with my sewing machine. We can't do foundation. It's just like if you think about paper piecing. We don't do curved lines on paper piecing. We break it up into straight lines. If you look at any paper piecing pattern or foundation piecing, whichever you want to call it, we always do it with straight lines. So we can't piece this curved part, but we could piece all of this in the middle. So if I wanted to come in here and just create, let me select my artwork and my magic wand and click on all the yellows. And then, oh, let's change this color to purple. That looks good. Okay, and then come back and click on all the purple. Dismiss my backdrop and just piece that part in the hoop. That's the hard part. I could certainly do that in the hoop, but I can't do curved pieces. So that was a very good question, though. That's why we only have 1,263 blocks instead of over 2,400 blocks like we do in My Quilt Embellisher. Do we have other questions?
Well, I think we're nearing the close of our session today. And Tamara, goodness gracious, we thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your joy of quilting and embroidery. There were some other questions that really pertain to dealers and price and things of that magnitude. Okay. And we appreciate the patience of everybody in this industry who have been waiting to receive their inspiration download links. And you will be receiving that link from an inspired dealer in your area no later than the 15th of October. We worked really hard to build our dealer network, and of course that does take time. And we will be posting things throughout the week that are tools for you if you have other questions that you need to inquire about. Otherwise, we hope to have everybody fully inspired, as I said, by October 15th. And one other question was, what does this software cost? Well, the MyBlock Piecer has an MSRP of $500. But during an event, which are called Inspiration Socials, dealers have tremendous specials that we put together just for your embroidery pleasure. And we have now over 60 different Inspiration Socials that are scheduled through February of 2015, and those will be posted this week as well. So we invite everybody to sign up with their local dealer or respond to our email marketing that we send out through Designs in Machine Embroidery and come join us at our Inspiration Socials. And we thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, Nancy and Dory, and all of our support staff. Y'all have a good evening.
You're so very welcome. The support staff, which is Bob Fultz, Debbie Fultz, Chris Morrow, Nancy Ruffley,
and Dory
grateful